The ending of Chapter 5 is absolutely insane, and yeah, I get that it's only been a short time since the release of Chapter 5, but considering how many plot points the devs left open, even if it might be a little early, I honestly can't wait to talk about all of this with you. Today, we're going to talk about the main location of Chapter 6, Huggy and Kissy, Poppy and the prototype, our new allies and potential enemies, the most likely release date, and of course, we'll decide whether Chapter 6 will be the final chapter that permanently wraps up the main storyline of Poppy Playtime. The finale of the 5th chapter managed to surprise a lot of fans, not just with how it ended, but with the number of events that left absolutely no one indifferent. But before that, I want to speak on the new, completely pointless drama that's unfolding around Chapter 5. While part of the community sees the game as peak, others were disappointed. Some didn't like the story, some didn't like the prototype's design, some were straight up unhappy with the ending. And that's totally normal since everyone had different expectations for the game. But turning all of this into another drama is the dumbest thing you could possibly come up with. This comment perfectly describes the whole situation. Chapter 3 was the first game in the Poppy Playtime series where everything felt perfect, and the whole Smiling Critters storyline became so massive that even before the chapter released, everyone was talking about them nonstop. A lot of people, including me, still have insanely warm memories of that game. And that's actually the problem, because recreating that same atmosphere and those same feelings during a playthrough is an insanely difficult task. I'm genuinely curious to hear your opinion on this situation, so I'll be waiting for everyone in the comments. Before we start breaking down the events of Chapter 6, I'll say just a couple words about the potential release date and the possible ending of the Poppy Playtime story. Mob Entertainment keep proving year after year that they don't need more than 12 months to create each new chapter. I'm more than sure the exact same thing will happen with Chapter 6, which means with a 95% chance the release of the new chapter will happen somewhere in the range between the beginning and the middle of February next year. This can also be backed up by the fact that it looks like Mob figured out the most successful release window for themselves, and that just happens to be the last day of January or February. On top of that, I'm 99% sure that Chapter 6 will finish the Poppy Playtime story. A lot of people were convinced that Chapter 5 would be the finale, but the devs completely shattered our expectations with the ending of that chapter. And before we finally move on to the main plot of Chapter 6, let's talk about the main location of the final chapter. One of the users discovered a massive, full-scale city model inside a cave. If you look closely, you can see that it has all the necessary infrastructure for movement and living. Right now, this city looks like it was built in 1995, but it's obvious the devs didn't add such an important detail for no reason. Even though it's rough, it's still detailed, and this city will clearly be an important part of the next chapter. We don't yet know the true purpose behind building this place, but if we assume it's located deeper than the labs, then it's most likely an insanely important facility for Playtime Co. One of our main goals in the game is not only killing the prototype, but also saving the orphans who might still be alive. In Chapter 4, Poppy assumed they would be located in the labs, but after exploring almost everything, we still didn't find them. At the same time, this city fits pretty well for holding and controlling the orphans. And for some reason, I'm sure this will be our final location where the battle with the prototype happens, and possibly the rescue of the orphans. Now that we've covered that, let's talk about the events that might happen in the next chapter, and the huge clue for us is the ending of Chapter 5. You can basically divide it into 3 parts. First, we see the scene with Huggy and Kissy. The decision by the devs to make such a plot twist wasn't just surprising, it genuinely shocked a lot of people. If we dive a little into the lore, we remember that Kissy was created specifically to calm Huggy, who is, let's say, not exactly the most friendly experiment. The employees of Playtime Co. did something similar with Daddy Longlegs, who was created to calm Mommy Longlegs, and while things between Mommy and Daddy ended in failure, Huggy actually managed to respond, and next to Kissy, he feels pretty calm without any hint of aggression. On top of that, Huggy and Kissy are pretty large monsters who survived a lot of different injuries and still stayed alive. Even though the prototype hurt them, they could very well survive. If there might be doubts about Kissy, since Giblet didn't directly reveal what he saw, when it comes to Huggy, not a single word was said. Maybe Giblet kept quiet about it because Huggy is technically our enemy, but there's also a chance that in the gap between the scenes, Giblet reached that place and simply didn't see Huggy there. Considering that Kissy is the only character who, so to speak, showed sympathy toward Huggy, I can easily imagine his rage toward the prototype after this event. In that case, we can confidently assume that in the end, Huggy will side with the resistance and help us achieve the final goal. His only motivation would be revenge for Kissy, but for us as the player, that would only work in our favor. The next part of the ending is way more interesting.
I thought you were gone. Poppy, I couldn't. He took her. Kissy is... I don't know. I don't... Look, I told you I wasn't a hero.
There were debates among fans about who the prototype threw into the barrel with Poppy Gel, but recently Amber revealed the truth that in the end, it was the player, which means Giblet pulled us out and saved us. But this is where things really start getting interesting. We understand that the prototype took Poppy and that he has some kind of plans for us if he kept us alive in that way. I'll have a detailed video about the second part soon, so we won't focus on that right now, but let's talk a bit about Poppy and the prototype. The prototype's goal is not to kill Poppy, because first of all, he could have done it many times, and secondly, pay attention to his reaction the moment he partially destroyed Poppy's face. He was genuinely surprised by that, because he didn't expect it to happen, and the only reason was the prototype's inability to control his grip strength. In that case, we understand that Poppy will be alive in the next chapter. Most likely, the prototype will run some experiments on her or just lock her up again in something similar to Poppy's case. I'm sure that during the events of Chapter 6, Poppy will be somewhere in that same city, and considering that the prototype will never hurt her after defeating the prototype, which most likely will happen in Chapter 6, along with the surviving orphans, I'm speaking very carefully about them because we don't know if they're alive or not, and this line from Lily Love Braids is a little unsettling. We'll also be able to save Poppy, but besides the prototype, one of our main enemies was also Dr. Harley Sawyer, whose return is the final part of the ending of Chapter 5. He was supposedly killed in Chapter 4, but Chapter 5 showed us something completely different. I won't dive too deep into Harley Sawyer's motives, I'll just say that he and the prototype were never friends. The prototype literally forced Harley to work for him, and considering Harley Sawyer's ambitions, I can confidently assume that at first he'll help us destroy the prototype, and as a result restore his former greatness. If before Sawyer had massive influence over Playtime Factory and his own, so to speak, army, now Harley Sawyer is just an old computer. However, the information he possesses is basically the key to defeating the prototype. There's a chance that after the destruction of the prototype, it's Harley Sawyer who will try to take his place, and in that case, before we fully free Playtime Co., we'll also have to kill Dr. Sawyer. Right now, we understand the main events and plot twists of the new chapter, and we also kind of see who's gonna be our ally, and who, on the other hand, will want us dead. I've already talked about many of them, but it's important to realize that in that very city, we're gonna meet both new allies and new enemies. I'm also sure that Giblet and Chum Chompkins will stay our friends. For now, that's all we know if we're sticking strictly to the facts, so I'm waiting for your thoughts down in the comments.